Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. One way of achieving that mission is listening to experts discuss pressing local, national, and international issues. Before COVID struck, concerned citizens met regularly to hear these experts. After COVID arrived, concerned citizens turned to Zoom, video recording talks, panels, and debates for later broadcast on this channel. Now that COVID is in remission, our main menu is again in-person meetings. But for those of you unable to join us, Village TV is video recording our in-person speakers for later broadcast on this program. In addition, when the right opportunity comes along, Concerned Citizens Presents will continue to offer the occasional remote speaker. We hope you enjoy today's program.
Good day to you, viewers and listeners. We welcome you to another Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods Village presentation of interviews on timely topics with fellow citizens who have an expertise in subjects of concern to our community. But first, a word about Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods Village. The Concerned Citizens organization is a champion of peaceful means to resolve disputes. They advocate justice for all and the need to improve, protect, and defend our shared environment. These beliefs have been at the core of this organization since it was first founded over 40 years ago. Today, our focus is on the specialist, Dr. Daniel Sperling, a graduate professor from the University of California, Davis, who specializes in policy solutions and analysis of transportation opportunities in this age of rapid changes. In keeping with the mission of our group, we explore, thanks to Lynn Long and Dr. Sperling, the readiness, needs, and opportunities existing in California and Laguna Woods Village for the electrical vehicles that so many people are now using for transportation. Looking to the future, you may already know the governor's mandate calls for only electric vehicles to be sold in the state in less than 13 years from now. Our timely discussion today is of importance to Laguna Woods Village as we prepare for that eventuality to protect our clean environment and promote a healthy community. I now turn the program over to Lynn Long, a member of our program committee, who will introduce our guest speaker this afternoon. As she may explain, ours is a discussion today that I am sure will pique your interest. Go ahead, Long.
Hello, Dan. Hello, my goodness. I was telling someone that I knew you when you had a full head of curly hair, and I was a size 4 waist. So that goes back 35 years. When did you start ITS Davis?
1982.
Okay, I was a size 6. But anyway, it's my pleasure, Dan, to introduce you. Longtime friend, longtime colleague. Dan Sperling is Distinguished Blue Planet Prize Professor of Civil Engineering and Environmental Science and founding director of the Institute of Transportation Studies 1982 and the Policy Institute for Energy, Environment, and Economy at the University of California, Davis. He was co-director of the 2007 study that designed California's landmark low carbon fuel standard and co-director of a 2010 national study of the same issue. Dan has testified 7 times to the U.S. Congress, and in 2008 was appointed the first chair of the Future of Transportation Council of the Davos World Economic Forum. In the past 30 years, he has authored or co-authored over 250 technical papers and 13 books, including 2 billion cars in 2009 and 3 revolutions, steering automated, shared, and electrical vehicles to a better future. He was the lead author of the transportation chapter of the UN Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, which shared the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize with former Vice President Al Gore. Dr. Sperling serves on many advisory committees and advisors senior executives of many automotive and energy companies, environmental groups, and national governments. He is an invited contributor to Forbes, energy expert contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and widely cited in op-ed contributions to the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and others. In recent years, he's been frequently interviewed on NPR radio, and in 2009 was featured on the Jon Stewart Daily Show. In 2013, he received the Blue Planet Prize for being a pioneer in opening up new fields of study to create more efficient, low carbon, and environmentally friendly transportation systems. Dr. Sperling holds a PhD in transportation from UC Berkeley with minors in economics and energy and resources. He worked for 2 years as an environmental planner for the US EPA and 2 years as an urban planner in the Peace Corps in Honduras. He has an undergraduate degree in engineering and urban planning from Cornell University.
Wow, that was quite,
Just
this
you
guy
go.
must be impressive.
Next time you look in the mirror, go, damn. Yes, you are impressive, Tim.
So you'd like me to kick off?
I think we should kick off.
Okay, so I've been asked to talk about electric vehicles. I'm going to also add in discussion about automated vehicles as well. So let me, just kind of characterize my background a little bit more. So I'm an academic. What I really love to do, I'm a policy wonk, and I'm a regulator. So, and one thing Lynn didn't add is I did grow up on a small family farm with chickens and eggs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, upstate New York.
Where Ithaca or Utica or
I went to school in Ithaca, but near Albany, New York. So
didn't know that.
yeah, Peace Corps. I'm married to a CEO, and who is also, by the way, vice chair of the California Air Resources Board. So I'm kind of, that's me. That's my world. So I'm going to talk about electric vehicles, automated vehicles, shared ride services, and I'll try to relate it as much as possible to Laguna Woods. So let's talk about electric vehicles a little bit, just to get started. Electric vehicles, they were around. In fact, they played a significant role 120 years ago. At the turn of the previous century, about 1/3 of all the vehicles on the road were electric vehicles. Well, there weren't many vehicles, but the ones that were, a lot of them were electric. But they gradually disappeared because gasoline and combustion engines came along that really provided a much better service to people. They were less expensive. You didn't have to charge them. They could go anywhere easily. But they disappeared. So electric vehicles disappeared, but back around in the 1980s, interest started perking up again. In 1990, California adopted a requirement that 10% of all vehicles sold by 2003 would have to be zero emission. Well, they were ahead of their time because the batteries were still expensive, cars were still expensive. So meanwhile, fast forward, batteries start getting better. Elon Musk comes along and starts promoting EVs and gives it a lot of attention, marketing profile, and costs keep coming down. So just to give you a sense of it, we talk about the dollars per kilowatt hour for batteries in terms of cost. So the cost was about $1,200 per kilowatt hour around 2010. Today, it's about $140. In other words, we've seen an 85% reduction in cost in the last 12 years or so. And there's a similar story with solar energy. And those are the two big success stories in terms of green technologies. And so with the drop in cost, there became a lot more interest in it. Tesla, Elon Musk and Tesla really marketed it. There was a Roadster and then Model S, and then other models came along. General Motors jumped in 2010. Nissan with its Leaf jumped in 2010. And it slowly increased, the market share slowly increased, costs were coming down. And then about, I'd say 2, 3, 4 years ago, the markets really started taking off. And just to update it to today, in China, which is the largest market in the world, close to 20% of all the cars sold in China are electric vehicles. 1 out of every 5 cars sold and China sells a lot more cars than the US or anywhere else does. And it's not just China, Europe is basically on the same trajectory. They're in the 15 to 20% market share range as well. And that's really just been in the last 2 or 3 years. And California the market's been steadily expanding. We're up to about 15% market share in California and increasing. So what you're seeing is in the 3 major, in 3 major markets in the world, electric vehicles are really getting more and more attention, more and more market share. And in fact, it's gotten to the point where there's no question that electric vehicles are going to dominate. They're going to basically replace all combustion engines, certainly for light duty vehicles. The question is exactly when. So if you look to the policy side in California, we are actually in 3 weeks, we're adopting a requirement that 100% of all vehicles sold must be zero emission by 2035. And it's not just 2035, that by 2026, which is just 4 years away, 1/3 must be zero emitting. By 2030, 8 years away, 2/3 must be zero emitting. So basically, you're not going to be buying many more gasoline cars, certainly in California. And Europe is adopting something very similar. So they're going to be adopting a requirement later this year for 100% ZEVs by 2035 as well. And China is pretty much on that trajectory also. So this is a done deal. And it's going to vary from region to region. It'll be a little different here or there. And when we talk about zero emission vehicles, there's actually 3 types that we're referring to. The most common battery electric vehicles, like the Tesla cars, the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt, and now every major car company in the world is producing and selling battery electric vehicles. And that's the dominant technology that will dominate in light duty. When I say light duty, I mean cars, pickups, minivans, and SUVs, technically defined as less than 8,500 pounds. So we're going to see mostly battery EVs coming in, but we're going to see also plug-in hybrids. So that's like the Chevy Volt with a V like Victor. I don't know why they did a Volt and a Bolt, just to confuse everyone, including themselves, I think. And so, but the Volt's been phased out, but there's many other companies making it. And we call these plug-in hybrids PHEVs. They vary quite a bit. It depends mostly on how big the battery is. So some of them have a big battery and run mostly on electricity. Others have a small battery and run mostly on gasoline. So the Toyota plug-in Prius, the first ones that came, they could only go 10 miles on electricity before they had to switch over to gasoline. Whereas like the Chevy Volt would go 35 or 40 miles before switching over. And in fact, the requirements from California are going to be that plug-in hybrids must be at least 35 miles starting in 2026. And by I believe it's 2028, they must be 50 miles range. And so the idea is you get in a plug-in hybrid and almost all of your driving will be on electricity, and you plug it in at night and you'll almost never need electricity except for very long trips. So the plug-in hybrids are attractive to people that are worried about, driving to grandma in Arizona and, running out of electricity or not being able to find a charger. I mean, that problem is going to be solved shortly, but people worry about it. And then there's the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. The most famous one is the Toyota Mirai, and that so it operates on hydrogen. And what it does, so you go to a fuel station, just like a gasoline station, fuel up with hydrogen in about the same amount of time. And then what the fuel cell does is it converts the hydrogen to electricity, and it's an electric car. So it runs on electricity, but you don't have a battery, or you just have a small battery. And so my own personal history, I own the gasoline Prius hybrid in 2000. That's where it has a tiny battery, and the battery is just used to boost the gasoline engine. So I had that for 10 years. Then I had a Nissan Leaf. Then I had my wife got I always say it's my wife's car. She got a Tesla, because I went carless for a couple of years. So I wanted to claim I didn't have a car. My favorite zero emission vehicle is my bicycle. But I had to acknowledge that the household did have a Tesla. And then along the way, I also had a Toyota Mirai hydrogen car. So I've owned many of them, driven almost all of them. Almost everyone considers it a superior technology. Electric drive, it's quieter, it's more energy efficient, there's no emissions. And so far they've been more expensive, but so that's the second part of the story, is the costs have been coming down so much that the cost of owning and operating an electric vehicle today, a battery electric, is getting pretty close to the cost of owning and operating a gasoline car. So even though it costs more to buy, the electricity is much less than the gasoline, and you have much less maintenance. And so if you do it on a total cost of ownership basis, now in practice, no one makes decisions based on total cost of ownership. We like how the car looks, we see what the price is. We don't do an analysis. We did focus groups with people, financial analysts, engineers. No one used that metric of total cost of ownership making a decision. So that's why we need incentives. Even though electric cars are going to be good for consumers, good for the economy, very shortly, that doesn't mean people will buy them. So we're going to be using incentives for probably quite a few years to get people to buy them. So that's kind of the electric vehicle story. If we look at it from a policy perspective, as I was indicating before, we've had a whole suite of different policies to get EVs on the road. People have been resistant, but I think we've gotten to the point where the car companies know how to make them. They got the technology, the costs have come down, they've got the supply chains, and probably the most effective policy now is just a mandate to the manufacturers to sell them. Even though I personally believe in market-based approaches and performance-based approaches, in this particular case, I think we just got to push the industry forward. There's the charging part of it, and that's a challenge because the reality is it's hard to make money selling electricity to vehicles. And that's just because if you think about it, a gasoline car fuels up in 5 minutes and spends $60 with a charger. It takes, if you have a fast charger, it's an hour and you spend maybe a couple dollars or so. So getting chargers out there is a little more complicated, but the best thing is if you own your own house, you just put a charger in your house and you just charge up at home, and that takes care of almost all your needs. And I would say that the electric vehicles, they used to be like the first Nissan Leaf. When they sold it in 2010, they said the range was 100 miles. But I know when I bought that car, I got it off the lot. It said 100 miles in the dealership. I got about a mile down the road and it was down to 80 miles already and dropping fast. But now almost all the EVs sold now have more than 200 miles of range. So that range anxiety problem has largely gone away. So anyway, so California is regulating, requiring it. Europe is requiring them. China is requiring them. And so it's a done deal. And it's just how fast this happens. Okay, let me jump just to close up, just talk a little bit about automated vehicles. One of my other favorite topics. So all of us, as we're getting old, if there's anything we should root for, it's automated vehicles, because, we don't see as well at night, getting more decrepit during the day. We need help. And who wants to drive anyway? I've always preferred being chauffeured. So that's what an automated vehicle is all about. So an automated vehicle can be used in two ways for passenger travel. One is it can just replace your manually driven vehicle. And now you just get in the car, you press a button and it would go where you want it to go. But if we do that, people are going to use these vehicles much more than they do now. We've done research at UC Davis. We actually had a project where we gave people human chauffeurs to simulate the experience of having an automated vehicle, and people roughly doubled their mileage, and retired people especially so, by the way. So, because the car becomes a bedroom, it becomes an office, becomes an entertainment complex. You can do whatever you want. So you don't really care so much if you're in that vehicle for a couple hours. So here, where I live in Davis, I could live up in Tahoe in the mountains and, take a 2-hour commute to work. I can do my work, I can watch a movie, I can do anything I want, I can sleep. So why not? So that's the fear. That's the risk with personally owned automated vehicles. The more desirable scenario from a public interest societal perspective is if they're owned by mobility service companies. Think Uber or Lyft type company, and except they're automated and they are shared. So you would, call the vehicle to come to you. It would be like those of you who have used Uber Pool or a Lyft Line, Lyft Share, and you would just share the ride with someone else. And if there's enough people using it, it's a slight detour, minimal, and you get there, and it's a much cheaper way of providing service. It's a way of providing access to people that are less affluent, to people with physical disabilities, because now it's really cheap to provide this service, much cheaper than providing buses or trains. And it's much higher quality service as well. So Automated vehicles, they're going to happen much slower than electric, but they're going to happen. There's quite a few companies testing them out, some of them with drivers in them, some of them with a safety person in them, just to make sure nothing goes wrong, but some of them don't have anyone in the vehicles. And probably the three leading companies are Waymo, which is Google, Zoox, which is Amazon, and Cruise, which is General Motors. So you got three of the biggest corporations in the world investing megabucks in developing it. And they've invested, I think I've seen estimates, over $100 billion in these automated vehicles. So, and we can talk about how they're going to happen, but, from in terms of, people that are looking for mobility and accessibility at reasonable cost, there's no better option. And I think if we're really thinking about sustainable transportation from an economic perspective, equity perspective, environmental perspective, these shared AVs, shared automated vehicles, running on electricity, that will all be electric vehicles, is really the best hope we have. But it's going to be slow coming in. There's resistance, there's insurance and liability gets involved in it. Local governments get nervous about it in terms of permitting. People are sometimes reluctant. People don't trust big corporations. There's a question of how safe do they have to be. I would argue that today, the average, state-of-the-art automated vehicle is probably better than the average driver, because
especially in here.
Maybe, but they don't drink, they don't fall asleep, they don't text. So, okay, they're not perfect. And, you can read in the newspapers love to tell stories about all the little travails that automated vehicles have. There's a story about the GM Cruise cars. They, 4 of them came to a stop at an intersection in San Francisco and just parked there in the middle of the intersection with each other. And there's other little stories, sometimes they don't pull over to the curb to let the person out. There's been a few, and there have been some accidents. Mostly they're fender benders. There was a person killed, which was in Arizona, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago. So that's the story. This is the best time in history for transportation. We went through decade after decade with almost no innovation. Our cars basically never changed. They changed a little bit in terms of a little safer, a little more comfortable, but 4 wheels, same speed, same size, same performance. And all of that is changing. They were all gasoline cars until a few years ago. That's changing. And now even, I talked about fully automated cars, but actually most new cars are partially automated. So my Tesla, for instance, whenever I get out on the freeway, I press a button and it just drives itself as long as I stay in that lane. I don't trust it to, there are versions of it that'll operate on streets, but I wouldn't trust it for that. But if you stay in your lane, it's very, very safe. And General Motors has cars that do that now. Volkswagen, all the major car companies, it's what we call advanced or adaptive cruise control is part of it, where it just automatically follows the car in front of you. And then automatic steering, which they use cameras and other technology to stay in the middle of the lane. And that technology is all very good, and especially on freeways. So there you have it. The revolutions are here. So I turn it back to you for any questions you might have.
Actually, I had a question, Jan. This may not be the time for it, but I was very interested in China and Europe seeming to go seamlessly into electric vehicles, what kind of infrastructure is provided for people? Is it different from here? Do they have government controlled charging stations or?
Everyone's trying to figure out charging, how to do it,
Yeah.
because as I said, it's hard to have a business model. So, there's various types of subsidies going into it in different kind of ways, like you go to a shopping mall. So the shopping mall subsidizes the chargers. If you at your employer, if they have chargers, the employer subsidizes it. The state subsidizes it. The federal government is about to release a whole pile of money to subsidize it as well. And so companies are doing
basically like here, we could do the same here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's no.
That was my thing.
Yeah. There's lots of suppliers. You can. Yeah. Almost. It's very easy.
You just need the will to do it.
Dan, I want to thank you for that. You did mention shared vehicles, and I thought actually you might be bringing up not just the car sharing, but electric buses and electric jitneys and things like that. Do you want to say anything about that, or is that too unfocused for? But are they usable, and will they play a role in?
So I was trying to talk about what's going to be new and different. So certainly we have buses and rail that are shared rides. Planes are shared rides too. And they're going to be all going to be around forever, because if you have a large number of people moving from one place to another, buses and rail transit are absolutely the best way to do it. They move large numbers of people very efficiently, low cost. But if you get away from these dense corridors and dense centers, the so-called legacy transit doesn't work as well. And so that's when you start needing these other kinds of modes of travel for suburban areas and other kinds of trip making that happens. And yes, these vehicles can be, we're not talking about just sharing, having 2 or 3 or 4 people. These shared vehicles can be essentially vans or small buses. So there is a company, Via, that operates that, not automated, but operates this service. It's kind of like Uber on steroids, where it's a mini buses and vans, but it's demand responsive, meaning you have your app, you press a button, comes pick you up, and that's larger numbers of riders. And so eventually we want to automate it so that'll be less expensive and more efficient.
From a policy point of view, I'm going to switch subjects here a little bit with the possibility that there will be more money for climate change coming out of the Biden administration. I think I saw $760 billion was mentioned, and if that bill does pass, how is that going to be distributed, and how is California from a policy? I assume it's going to be the state of California that's going to administer the funds. They're going to be sent to California, and then California would administer the funds. What kind of I guess uses would they put that money to in terms of EVs? Do you have any insight into that?
So there's basically 2 pots of money. So there's one pot that was in the infrastructure bill, when was it, last fall, that was passed. And that had, I believe it's $7 billion in it for charging infrastructure. And in fact, every state had to submit a plan. Yesterday was the deadline to get that money, and every state did do that. And so in the next few months, the feds are going to be distributing that money to the states. And as you said, Bill, it will go directly to the states. And then the states have to, each state, figure out how they're going to use that money and allocate it. And every state will be doing it differently. The other pot of money, which actually hasn't happened yet, it's the new bill that looks like it's about to be signed, the new climate bill, that has a provision for incentives for electric vehicles. So it's actually a quite good policy. So the federal government has been offering a $7,500 tax credit for anyone that buys a new electric vehicle. They capped it, per company. So each company could only sell a total of 200,000. And General Motors and Tesla had already reached it. Toyota just reached it. Nissan was about to. So they're about, if the dear senator from Arizona doesn't muck up the works on this one, that it will be passed. And everyone tells me it's 95% certain. And so what that'll do is it continues that $7,500 tax credit, but it's done much better, because before it was a tax credit, meaning, first of all, you had to be enough money to claim the tax credit. So therefore it was really biased towards more affluent people. And you had to do it as a tax credit. So, if they tell you the money's in the mail, send a coupon in, it has much less influence on your decision. And that's what that was. But the new one is what we call point of sale on the hood. So when you buy the car, you get the money right on the spot. And that's good. And then it actually also has a tax credit for used EVs of $4,000 as well, which is good because most people buy used cars. Something like 2/3 of all the cars sold in any one year are used cars, not new cars. And in fact, only about 1/3 of households buy new cars. Most people buy used cars. So that's a good thing. And so point of sale, used cars, and they put into it all kinds of constraints. The batteries have to be manufactured, or the vehicle has to be manufactured in the US. The minerals for the batteries have to be in the US or a friendly country, which is very specifically defined in a very weird, arcane way. Like, for instance, Europe doesn't count as they don't use the word friendly. It's that countries that have free trade agreements. So like Europe doesn't have free trade agreements, but there's all these obscure countries that do. But anyway, there's a lot of twists and turns to it, but basically it's a good thing. And what it means if the Arizona senator doesn't block it, it means that we will have $7,500 tax credits for new, $4,000 for used, and it's all the way through 2032.
So what, another question is the EV industry looking ahead going to become reliant upon the implementation or the development of solid state battery technology? Are they planning on that, or are they going to stick with the lithium paradigm?
Yeah, there's lots and lots of research going into different battery chemistries and solid state batteries, and it seems likely that there will be a gradual transition to some of these new chemistries, and that'll basically keep the cost coming down slowly. They're not going to come down a huge amount because they're already fairly inexpensive and there's a lot of materials involved in it. But yes, we're going to see continued improvements in value. We might see a blip in terms of costs, that little problem over in Ukraine, and our non-friend Mr. Putin are really causing supply chain disruptions and causing a lot of these costs to go up, inflation generally, but for a lot of these minerals as well. So it might be that there'll be a 1 or 2 year blip where the costs won't go down, but then they should start going down again, after that.
So from policy, does it appear that there's going to be a big influx in charging installations in the state of California?
There's going to be a massive expansion of charging infrastructure. And yeah, so there's going to be a lot of money going into it. There's going to be so many more vehicles. And what happens now, most people buying EVs now have their own homes, and they can, just put in a charger in their house. It's simple and cheap and easy for the most part. And you can do most of your charging there. But people that live in apartments and condos and don't have their own place, which tends to be people that are less affluent and therefore later buyers, they're not the early adopters. As we move beyond these early adopters, we are going to have to really ramp up the public infrastructure. And we will be seeing that happen going forward. It might turn out that some people say they'd rather have a hydrogen car. Maybe it'll cost a little more, but then they don't have to worry about the charging. You can go to a fuel station.
Right.
But of course, we got to have the hydrogen station. So right now in California, there's 50 hydrogen stations. So we would need more of those too.
Right. I have even heard that people at UCI have thrown out the idea that they could use the natural gas lines to transport hydrogen as one means of getting hydrogen distributed more quickly. But that's a whole nother subject in and of itself.
Yeah, the UC Irvine does a lot of work on hydrogen. We do, and we in Davis and them in Irvine are the two major universities dealing with the hydrogen.
So yeah, we have, and I think we talked about it. We definitely in our HOA have issues with our electric infrastructure, and so charging stations are going to become really critical for the community. We're debating going with what to do, whether to wait for this infrastructure to develop around us. We certainly don't want to see people turned away from our community because they can't charge their vehicle on a 110 circuit. That's a concern. I myself charge my EV on a dryer outlet in my 220 30 amp service, but not all the places in the community have that luxury. So.
Well, for many people, actually the 110 regular outlet actually does work because, if you don't drive that far, if you drive 30 or 40 miles a day, you can easily charge that up, overnight and then some. So when I had my Nissan Leaf, I used 110 all the time. People make a big deal about having 240 and so on and fast charging, but you can actually, if you don't do a lot of driving, the 110 can work. And then you just pull a plug, just put into a plug. But, for the market, we do need the so-called level 2, which is, essentially a dryer type circuit.
Yeah.
But you can't be passive. I mean, you don't have to be passive about this. I mean, you can call up the utility, you can call up these charging companies and tell them you want one. They'll put it in. You tell them we've got a bunch of people use it. You can bet they'll put it in, lickety split.
We're looking at the Charge Ready 2 program right now. Edison wants to do that. And then we do have some chargers behind our community center. We've got some high DC fast chargers in there. But I think too, in a senior community like this, convenience is important too. And having access, nobody wants to go out to a converted gasoline station that has chargers in it and sit there while the car charges.
So you're going to have to develop some etiquette rules here.
We have.
Okay.
We've got golf carts too, so.
Okay.
electric golf
All right,
carts. So
your
it
experience.
is amazing what people have done in those situations. They have scheduled certain things charged during the day and certain things charged at night. And so people adapt, it's a situation. But yeah, I'm hoping that that charging infrastructure really gets moving quickly. And, if it's good to hear you think that's going to start happening soon.
Absolutely.
To follow up on that, Dan, is that going to happen quickly because of the state's commitment? Or is it a shared federal and state commitment? Or is it these companies like Charge Plus that see a market and want to meet the demands that you probably have already run into that? Well, you have a Tesla, so you don't run into this, but in most plug-in cars, you're already in a lot and all the places are taken, whether it be in a mall or in a local shopping center. So why is it going to be massive expansion of EV chargers?
Because everyone knows it has to happen. The car companies know it, the electric utilities know it, the local governments know it, the state knows it, the feds know it. So there's going to be, the utilities are supporting it also because it's in their interest as well. It's, it's more revenue on the one hand, and it helps them balance their load, manage their load better, because they can, you can manage when the charging happens. And so everyone's on board. It's, I mean, it doesn't mean it happens quickly. Local governments are slow at permitting and, stuff happens. And then there's also a challenge sometimes in terms of accountability and reliability. So some companies aren't as good at maintaining their chargers as others. There was a study done, actually a professor up at Berkeley. They went out and they just sent a bunch of people around the San Francisco area and just to see if the chargers were working. And they found 25% of them were not, for one reason or another. Sometimes the charger, sometimes the credit card didn't work, sometimes the cable wasn't long enough, and so we're working through this, and Tesla really has created a model on how to do it right. And Tesla is now proposing that they're going to open up some of their chargers for a price to others.
Yeah, if you can get in a CCS1 adapter to go with your, with your charge point charging station. From a policy point of view, do you think municipalities like Laguna Woods, the city, would be able to get some of these monies for putting charging stations in if they worked at it?
They wouldn't even have to work at it much. It's like, it should be pretty easy. So who is Edison your?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
so
California.
Edison is one of the national leaders, if not the national leader on electric vehicles. So they've been doing this for a while. So I don't know the details of it with Edison, but it's got to be easy to arrange it. It might take time. Yeah, I would suggest starting today, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll get on the email tonight, send some emails to the council people.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Dan, you mentioned the reticence of permitting agencies to move quickly. Is that basically because they misunderstand the opportunity? They are fiscally so conservative that they don't realize that in the long run, investments in EV charging and solar are to the benefit of communities? What are some of the obstacles, I guess, that cause you think these communities not to embrace very quickly these new changes?
So you characterize it as kind of a policy, but the mayor is not the one approving the permits. So, you got the, these, the offices that deal with it, they've done it a certain way. They don't have experience with it, something new. And then you've got NIMBYism, people complaining about this or that. And so, and then you got to find the land. So the major cost of putting these chargers in is the so-called soft costs. The actual charger is not that expensive. It's all the, the land, the permitting, the time, the people to get it done.
Yeah, we run into issues because it's a 50 or 60-year-old community of sometimes transformers that we have in place can't support that additional current. So
yeah. So that in that case, you got to go to the utility to upgrade the transformer.
Right. And the SCE basically is not that cheap to put, going from their transformer to a meter to put the charging stations in. It's no free lunch there, and that's why I'm interested in these funds from the state that are going to be released soon. I think it's real important.
Yep. Yep.
Dan, as also a part of this issue, I've seen in other presentations, a concern for the low income end of the spectrum, you might say. And there are certainly people in retirement communities that are on static incomes, or at least declining incomes in terms of inflation. Are there programs statewide? Are there policies that do address the fact that in a way, what we've done with electric vehicles is what we did with the first cars, and that is rich people could afford to have these things. But what about the people who are working class as far as these changes?
I think every policy, so speaking with my regulator hat on, my policymaker hat on, every single policy we do goes through the lens of environmental social justice. And so, for instance, so I didn't mention, but California provides incentives also for buying an electric vehicle. And those are limited. If your income is above a certain amount, you can't get it. And if you're low income, you get even bigger incentives for you. And the new federal incentives are like that also. They cap. So I believe you cannot get an incentive for a car that's over, I think, $55,000, or an SUV or pickup over maybe, I don't remember the exact number, 60, 70, 80. So, and then also if your income is over a certain amount, you don't get an incentive, you're not eligible for incentives. So, and then, as I told you, with the federal government now, this new incentive is for used EVs. So all of that is intended to try not to be subsidizing the rich, but instead helping out middle income, lower income people. And in fact, and for the chargers, there's a lot of the formulas and the incentives are also to place chargers in low-income communities, underserved communities. So, I mean, but it is, the fundamentals are new cars are expensive. It's more affluent people that buy new cars. And so, that's where we're starting. And the reality is, if we want to accelerate the diffusion, the dissemination of new technology, any new technology, but in this case, electric vehicles, it is the more affluent people that start it, and then you work down. But California is trying hard, and the Biden administration also, to make sure we're not subsidizing rich people, and that we're helping out lower income as much as possible.
Yeah, my experience has been, we had an e-Golf for about the last 6 years. We leased them and we got the incentives, but when we bought our latest car, we don't qualify anymore because we've used up our incentives. So there is a cap on that. which I think is a good thing. I mean, it's not, you know, I don't need the incentive, you know, I mean, not everybody does, but it's good to know that they're trying their best to make it easier for middle income or lower income folks to adopt this technology.
Yeah, I think the used EV credit is the most important, far more important than for new vehicles. And that's what, you know, most people buy. So I think that's a great innovation. And California is starting to do that as well in a more, so far, haphazard way. But I think we'll be transforming our incentive programs also to support and favor used EVs.
You know, Dan, for the skeptics who may be listening into the program today, the connection between cleaner mobility and the replacement of fossil fuels, you said this is already a done deal with EVs and soon AVs. Can we address just briefly this issue? Is it really an improvement to the environment that we go all electric, or is this just something that's been, I don't know, the deep state has come up with just to convince us to buy things we don't need, like changing your TV because you can't use your old TV or something like that. But you see what I'm getting at is how clean is clean energy for these vehicles, and how do we approach this from a healthy perspective? You know, it's healthier for old people not to be around fossil fumes and fuel fumes and those sorts of things. Can you, is it true? Are these really clean,
including
good environmental things?
Switch from your gas stove to an electric stove. How's that? Okay, so, but I'll stick to my, in my lane, what I really know about with vehicles, so in climate policy. So the number one policy and strategy to reduce greenhouse gases is to switch to renewable electricity and maybe nuclear, but away from fossil. That's the number one most important thing. The number two is electric vehicles. And that's because we're going to be switching almost everything, not everything, but switching much more to electricity, like our appliances, our stoves, and our vehicles. And so if they're running on zero carbon electricity, then you get a lot more bang for your buck. So you need renewable electricity. Number one, you need EVs. So if you have EVs running on renewable electricity, you have basically close to zero carbon, and unequivocally. But even if the grid, if you're in Kentucky and 60% of the electricity is from coal, the EV is still substantially better than a gasoline car.
In closing, I just wanted to make sure that we understood that Dr. Sperling has given us a concise and very, I think, complete look at everything except for the fleets that we might want to talk about next time. And that is, as an HOA, you must realize we have these fleets of vehicles that could probably benefit from electrification as well. So I'm glad the future looks as bright as it does. Maybe it's because you're driving your Tesla and it's got an automatic pilot and you're on a freeway. But for some of us, we've got potholes in this molten parkway that gets us back to the interstate and the freeway. But my thanks to Lynn Long in putting this together on the program committee of Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods. I want to thank William Walsh, Bill Walsh, past member of the Third Mutual Board, who's really spearheaded a good deal of change in our community. And thanks to Dr. Suzanne Modell, who has put this together for us this afternoon and made this program possible. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you will be with us again when Concerned Citizens brings you a educated look at a common problem. Thanks.